Morning comes to Corinth, and the palace above the harbor is already loud with work. Servants carry water up the steps while the sea below turns from gray to bronze. Wine jars stand in rows along the courtyard wall, sealed and waiting for the evening. Two boys drag garlands of pine across the stone, and an older woman straightens them. A cook lifts the lid of a pot and steam climbs into the cold air. Outside the gate, a crowd has already gathered to watch the bride come out. Guards move the people back from the doorway with the flat sides of their spears. Everyone in this city knows what happens today, and everyone knows who is not invited. Inside, in the women's rooms, a girl of about 16 stands very still. Her name is Glaush, and she is the daughter of Creon, the king of this city. She keeps turning her head to watch the window light move across her sleeve. She is marrying a hero, and every girl in Corinth knows his name and his ship. A servant comes to the door and says that a gift has arrived at the gate. Two boys carry a wooden chest into the room and set it down on the floor. They are perhaps 10 and 7, dark-haired, and they look at nobody in the room. The older one keeps his hand on his brother's shoulder for the whole time. The women stop combing and stand there with the pins still held in their hands. Nobody in the room asks aloud whose sons these two quiet boys actually are. Nobody in this palace says the name of their mother out loud. The lid comes up, and the light in the whole room seems to change color. Inside lies a dress of fine cloth, pale as milk, folded with great care. On top of it sits a crown of worked gold, thin as a leaf, cool to touch. The girl reaches into the chest before anyone can stop her, because she is 16. An older servant opens her mouth to say something, and then closes it again. The two boys are already at the door, walking out into the long corridor. Nobody in the room follows them, and the door stays open behind their backs. The girl lifts the crown with both hands and turns toward the polished bronze mirror. Gold catches the lamp and throws a small moving light across the painted wall. She raises it slowly toward her hair, and the women watch without moving. We are going to leave her there, with her arms up and the gold above her head. To understand what is about to happen in that room, we have to go back years. Far to the east, on another night, a black sea carries wreckage on the water. Broken oars float apart from each other, and a torch on a distant deck goes out. In a hall in another city, an old king sits beside a cauldron of steam. Herbs turn slowly on the surface of the water, and the room smells of cut grass. His daughters stand in the doorway holding lamps, watching, believing what they are shown. On a beach many years later, a ship lies pulled up high on the sand. Its timbers are gray, split by sun, and thin grass grows up through the planks. A man with gray hair sleeps in the shade under the curve of its hull. He has no cloak, no guard, and no name that anyone on this coast still uses. Above him, one beam of old oak carries the whole weight of the dead ship. All of this began as the greatest love story that the Greeks ever told each other. A princess on the far shore of the world, a captain, a golden fleece on a tree. She gave up her father, her country, and her language for a man she had just met. He swore in front of an altar that he would keep her as his wife forever. For a while, it was the story everyone wanted, carried by singers from city to city. There is a part the songs move past quickly, and it changes the shape of everything. That love did not begin inside her, and it was never entirely her own. On a mountain far from her country, two goddesses looked down at a girl. They studied her the way generals study a map on the night before a war. They needed a king in Iolcus to fall, and they needed a man to bring back a fleece. The girl in the eastern palace was the tool that made both of those things possible. A small archer was sent down into the hall of her father with a single arrow. Nothing in that hall moved when it struck her, and nobody present saw it happen. She stood up that evening carrying a feeling she had never carried before. It arrived from somewhere outside her, and for the rest of her life it stayed. When the work was finished, the goddesses did not come back to collect their tool. Everything that follows that arrow is the bill for a war she never chose to start. This story follows that bill through 4 cities and across about 20 years. By the end, you will know why Greek parents told this story to their own children. Not as a romance, and not as a warning about foreign women, whatever later writers said. It was a warning about promises, and about a person left with nowhere to go. Every step this woman takes from here is another door closing behind her back. Somebody else closes almost every one of those doors, and she remembers each of them. Hold that room in Corinth in your mind while we go back to the beginning. A girl of 16, a crown of gold in her hands, and an open door behind her. First there is a boy hidden in the mountains, a stolen throne, and one lost sandal. Iolcus stands on a bay in the north, a working port with a fleet and a market. In the hall of that house, a man named Peleus sits in a chair that is not his by birth. The rightful king is his half-brother Aeson, who is still alive and who still lives in the city. Aeson keeps a house near the harbor. He keeps his name, and he keeps nothing else. Guards stand at his gate, and every visitor is counted going in and going out. The kingship was not taken in one night with knives. It was taken slowly, in daylight. Peleus holds the treasury, the ships, the priests, and the men with spears at the doors. In this city, there is no crime to point at, only a chair with the wrong man in it. Then a child is born in the house by the harbor, and the arithmetic changes. A boy who is alive is a claim, and a claim will grow up and come back. The women in the house understand this before the sun comes up on the first morning. That night, a small bundle goes out of a side door and up a track into the dark. In the morning, the house fills with the sound of women mourning a dead infant. They tear their clothes in the doorway where the neighbors can watch them do it. Up on the mountain, the same child is carried higher, past the last farms and the last wall. The track ends at a cave in the rock, with a spring running out below it. What lives in that cave is not a man, and every family in the region knows it. From the waist up he is old, gray-bearded, with the eyes of a physician. Below that he is a horse, and he stands in the mouth of the cave and takes the child. His name is Chiron, and he has raised the sons of kings before this one. The boy grows up on a mountain with no throne room, no guards, and no city walls. He learns which plants close a wound, and which ones stop a heart in an hour. One tradition says the centaur gave him a new name, and the name means healer. Down in the bay, the man in the chair grows older and sleeps a little worse each year. A king who takes the throne spends the rest of his life watching the road into town. So Peleus sends to a priest of Apollo for an answer, and he gets one he did not want. The warning is not about an army, a fleet, a brother, or a foreign king. He is told to beware of the man who comes into his city wearing one sandal. It is a small thing, a stupid thing, and it is the kind of thing that eats a man. From that day, the king of Iolcus watches feet. Years pass, nobody arrives with a bare foot, and the fear becomes part of the furniture. There is one more thing in this city that the king has not counted properly. In the temple on the hill, the altar of Hera is kept, but it is not fed. Bulls go to Poseidon, wine goes to Apollo, and the queen of the gods gets nothing from this house. One tradition says the offense is much older and much worse than a skipped sacrifice. It says that Peleus once killed a woman who had run to Hera's altar for protection. He dragged her out of the sanctuary and did it there in front of the goddess. Mortals forget these things in a season, and the gods keep them for 40 years. Hera does not send a plague on Iolcus, and she does not strike the man in his hall. She waits, and she starts looking for a hand that can do the work for her. On the mountain, the boy is now 20 years old and taller than the man who raised him. He comes down the track with 2 spears, a leopard skin on his shoulders, and long uncut hair. Nobody on the road recognizes him, and nobody yet knows what he has come to ask for. He reaches the river called Anorus, and the river is high and brown with spring water. On the near bank, an old woman stands looking at the current and not crossing it. She is small, bent, wrapped in cloth, and she does not ask him for anything. He puts down his spears and lifts her onto his back and steps into the water. Halfway across, the mud on the bottom closes around 1 foot and takes the sandal off it. He does not stop for it because there is a woman on his back and a current on his side. On the far bank, he sets her down carefully on dry ground and turns to find his footing. When he looks up, the old woman is standing straighter than she was before. She is taller now, the cloth is cleaner, and the air around her is very still. He is 20 years old, he is cold, and he is thinking about a lost sandal. So he thanks her, picks up his spears, and walks on toward the city on the bay. Behind him the goddess watches him go, and knows exactly where he will be by evening. The road into Iolcus that day is full, because the king is holding a great sacrifice. The young man walks in through the gate with mud on his legs and 1 foot bare. A woman selling bread looks down at that foot and stops talking in the middle of a word. The look moves through the crowd the way a crack moves across ice. By the time he reaches the open ground by the altars, people are standing back from him. Peleus comes down the steps in his festival clothes with the smell of burning fat in the air. He sees the young face first, and it is a face he half recognizes from his brother. Then his eyes go down to the ground, and he finds the bare foot in the dust. The king does not shout, and he does not call his guards, because there are too many witnesses. He asks the stranger a question instead, calmly, in front of the whole city. Suppose a man was told that one of his own citizens would one day kill him. What should that man do about it, if he wanted to be fair about the matter? It is a trap, and the crowd goes quiet, and the young man answers without much thought. Send him after something impossible, he says, and let the distance settle it. Send him to bring back the golden fleece from the far end of the sea. The answer comes out of his mouth too easily for a man who has never been in a court. On the hill above the harbor, the neglected altar of Hera stands in the sun. The thing that Iolcus calls the golden fleece is real, and it hangs a long way east. 2 children of a Greek king once fled from their stepmother on the back of a flying ram. The boy reached the coast at the far eastern corner of the Black Sea and came down alive. He sacrificed the ram there and gave its golden hide to the king of that country. The hide was hung on an oak in a grove that belongs to the god of war. Under the tree, a serpent lies coiled around the trunk, and it does not sleep. Nobody in Greece has ever sailed that far east and come home to describe it. Peleus hears his own death sentence recited back to him as a travel plan. He tells the crowd that the young man has spoken well, and that the task is his. Bring the fleece to Iolcus, he says, and the chair in the hall goes to you. He says it loudly, on a festival day, with the priests and the whole port listening. It costs him nothing, because he is certain the sea will do the work for him. The young man takes the offer in front of everyone, because he is 20 and it sounds fair. He has been raised by a centaur on herbs and hunting, not on men like this one. What he cannot see is that the answer he gave was put into his mouth. A goddess needed the man in that chair to fall, and she needed a ship to sail east. She needed one more thing as well, and that thing is not in Iolcus. It is a girl in a palace at the far end of the sea, and she has not been touched yet. First, the ship has to be built, and it has to be built out of the right wood. The work starts on a beach at Pagasai, a bay under the mountain where the boy grew up. A shipwright named Argus lays out the keel on the sand and marks it with charcoal. 50 oars, 25 to a side, 1 mast, and a hull meant for open water. Ribs go up along the keel like the bones of an animal lying on its back. A woman arrives at the yard one morning, and the shipwright does not ask who she is. She is tall, armed, and she carries a length of dark oak under one arm. That wood was cut in the grove at Dodona, where the trees are said to give answers. Priests there listen to the oaks and the wind and tell people what the leaves said. The beam goes into the ship at the prow, and the shipwright sets it himself. When it is fitted, the men working nearby stop and look at each other for a moment. Nobody says what they heard, and the work goes on until the light fails. The ship is finished before the autumn, and she is given the name of the man who built her. She is dragged down the sand on rollers and takes the water without a sound. The call goes out across Greece all summer, carried by traders and by singers. Come to Pagasai, take an oar, and sail east past the edge of the maps. Some come for the fleece, some for the story, and a few come because they are not wanted at home. A giant walks in from the south with a club and a lion skin over his shoulders. He is the most famous man alive, and half the crew expects him to take command. He refuses it in front of everyone, and points at the young man with the bare foot. Another arrival carries no weapon at all, only a wooden instrument with strings. He is a singer from Thrace, and the crew laughs when they see what he brought. On the 5th day out, when the rowing falls apart, he is the reason it comes back together. 50 men, sons of kings and sons of nobody, a helmsman who can read a coast. On the beach, the mothers stand in a group and do not come down to the water. Somewhere behind them, an old man in a house by the harbor is not allowed to attend. The ship goes out past the headland, with the oars in time and the town watching. First landfall is an island where something is wrong before anyone steps ashore. When the figures come closer, every one of them is a woman holding a spear. There are no men on this island, and the women give an answer that explains nothing. Days go by, then a month, then the season starts turning, and nobody is counting. The young captain is in the queen's house, and the fleece has stopped being mentioned. It is the giant who ends it, standing on the beach and shouting at the whole crew. He asks them whether they came here for a hide of gold or for a warm bed. The oars go back in the water the next morning, and the island falls behind them. That island cost them most of a season, and it did not cost them anything else. The next stop costs more, and it cost them the strongest man they had. A boy sent for water at a spring does not come back to the fire that night. The giant goes into the woods calling his name, and he does not come back either. The ship waits, the wind turns fair, and a decision is made at first light. They sail without him, and the crew argues about that decision for the rest of the voyage. Now the strongest arm on board belongs to nobody in particular, and the coast is getting stranger. Somewhere along that coast, the ship stops at a place with a house on a cliff. An old man lives in it, and he has been a king, and he has been a prophet. He is blind now, and he is thin in a way that no illness explains properly. A table stands in his hall, set with bread and meat, and it is set every single day. He reaches for the food, and the air above the table moves before his hand does. Wings come down through the smoke hole, and the sound of them is wrong for birds. What is left on the table afterward is not food, and the smell stays in the room for hours. This has been happening to him for years, and he has learned to sit down anyway. He tells the crew he has been punished for saying too much about the future. 2 of the men on board have wings, because their father is the north wind. They wait by the table, and when the wings come down they go up after them. The hall is quiet for the first time in years, and the old man eats a full meal. He pays the crew in the only currency he has, which is what he knows. He tells them what the sea ahead does, and he tells them exactly how to survive it. Take a dove, he says, and let the bird go in before the ship goes in. Watch what the bird loses, and then row harder than you have ever rowed. He tells them one thing more, quietly, about a girl in the country they are sailing toward. He says the fleece will not be taken by the strength of any man on this ship. Then he stops talking, and he will not say another word about it. The ship comes to the place 2 days later, at the narrowest point of the strait. Ahead there are 2 cliffs standing in the water, with a channel of white foam between them. The crew watches, and the cliffs move, and they come together with a sound like thunder. Spray goes up higher than the mast, and the water between them boils and goes flat. Then the rocks separate again, and the channel opens, and the sea rushes back into it. The helmsman holds the ship off and counts, and the singer starts a rhythm on the strings. A dove goes up from the deck, small and white against the wet black stone. It flies through the gap, the rocks come in behind it, and the bird comes out the other side. Feathers drift down onto the water where the tail of the bird used to be. The oars go in on the count, and the ship enters the channel at full speed. Green water runs down both cliffs. The rowers cannot see the sky, and the noise takes their hearing. A wave takes the bow up and holds the ship in one place for 2 long seconds. Something at the prow speaks then, and the helmsman puts his weight on the steering oar. The rocks close, the stern ornament is taken off clean, and the ship is through. Behind them, the cliffs settle into the sea and never move again after that day. Nobody on board says anything for a while, and one man is looking at his hands. They are in a sea that no Greek ship has come back from, and the coast is unfamiliar. The water turns cold, and the color of the land goes from gray to deep green. Rivers come down out of high mountains, and the villages on the banks use another language. On the last evening, the helmsman brings the ship into the mouth of a wide, brown river. The banks are thick with willows, and there are shapes hanging in the branches above the water. The crew looks up at them, and the singer stops playing without being asked to stop. Ahead, upriver, there are towers and smoke and the lights of a large city. Somewhere in that city, a girl who serves a goddess of the crossroads is asleep. She has done nothing, she has chosen nothing, and she has never heard the name of this ship. On a mountain, a long way behind them, two goddesses are already discussing her. The ship comes up the brown river at first light with the oars muffled in cloth. They bring her into a bend of the bank where the reeds stand taller than a man. Willows close over the mast, and from midstream the ship is a shadow among shadows. Two young men on board grew up in this city, and their mother is a daughter of its king. They were pulled out of a wreck days ago, and they are the only door the crew has. The palace stands above the river behind a wall of dressed stone and a wide court. 4 fountains run in that court, and what comes out of them is not all water. One runs milk, one runs wine, one runs oil, and one runs cold and then hot. Bronze bulls stand in a pen at the far end of the court with their heads down. Their feet are metal, their mouths are metal, and the grass around the pen is burned black. The king of this country is called Aeetes, and his father is the sun. When he turns his head in a dark room, the light on his face has no source. Outside the walls he keeps a grove that belongs to the god of war. In that grove stands an oak, and on the oak hangs a hide of gold. It is a ram's fleece, it has been rained on for years, and it has not dulled. Around the trunk lies a serpent as long as a ship, coiled in loops, awake. It does not sleep in shifts, it does not sleep at night, and it has never slept at all. Guards walk the edge of that grove, and not one of them walks under the tree. There is a person inside the palace who could open every door in this country. She is the king's younger daughter, and her name is Medea. She is a granddaughter of the sun on one side, and of the ocean on the other. She serves the goddess of the crossroads, and she keeps her temple out on the river road. She knows every plant that grows in that country, and what each one does to a body. In her room there is a chest with small boxes inside it, and the chest is kept locked. Nothing in her life has been chosen by her yet, and nothing in it has gone wrong yet. Hera has followed this ship all the way east, and she can already see the ending. Strength will not take that hide off that tree, and she knows it before the crew does. So she goes to another house on the mountain to ask for something she cannot do. Aphrodite is sitting with her hair down, working through it with a comb of gold. She is surprised, because the queen of the gods does not visit her and does not ask. Hera says what she wants in plain words, without dressing it up as anything else. She wants the girl in the eastern palace to love the captain of that ship. Not later, not slowly, and not because of anything the man says or does. Aphrodite agrees, and then admits that she cannot manage her own son at all. He does not listen to her, and the last time she raised her hand, he laughed. The two of them go out to find him, and he is not far away. He has won all of the other boys' pieces, and he is holding them against his chest. The child is cheating, and he is winning, and he is enjoying the second thing more. His mother takes his chin in her hand and asks him for one small piece of work. He wants payment first, and he names his price before she can offer anything. There is a ball kept in a storeroom, gold, with dark blue rings running around it. When it is thrown, it leaves a track in the air like a star coming down. It belonged to Zeus when Zeus was a child, and that is the fee for this. He takes his bow, drops down through the air, and comes into the city from the water. Nothing in that palace registers his arrival, because nothing in it is built to. In the hall, the Greeks come in behind the 2 grandsons of the king. They are washed, they are unarmed, and they have agreed to let one man speak. The king comes down to them, because his own daughter's sons are standing in the room. His younger daughter comes in from a side door, because the house is talking about strangers. She stops in the doorway with one hand still on the frame and looks at the group. Behind a pillar, the child is already there, with the string drawn back to his chest. He lets it go, it makes no sound, and it goes into her and stays. No one else in the hall sees anything at all, and the servants keep pouring wine. She does not cry out, she does not sit down, and her face barely changes. Something under her ribs has started burning slowly, and she has no word for it. She hears her father speaking, and she cannot follow the sense of the words. She looks at the stranger's hands, then down at the floor, then at his hands again. This is the moment the whole story turns, and she has no part in it. A god took aim at a young woman who had done nothing to anyone. She will spend the next 20 years paying for it, and the archer went home to play. The conversation in the hall goes bad as soon as the fleece is actually named. The king understands in one breath that these men have come for his property. He does not throw them out because his own grandsons walk them under his roof. He smiles instead, and he offers a fair test, and the room relaxes for a moment. Yoke the bulls in the pen, he says, the ones with the bronze feet and the fire. Plow the field of the war god with them, 4 measures of ground, in one day. Sow that field, he says, and I will hand you the seed out of a helmet myself. The seed is a set of serpents' teeth, and what grows out of them is armed men. Cut the crop down before evening, and the hide on the oak is yours to carry. He has done this work himself once, and he is the son of a god. The captain accepts, because there is nothing else a guest can say in that court. They cross the whole sea to be handed a job that kills a man before noon. That night the rain comes in off the mountains, and the palace is dark and shuttered. In her room, the king's daughter lies with her eyes open and her hands flat. Every time she closes them, the same face is in the room with her. Toward morning, she sleeps for an hour, and a dream takes her out to the field. In the dream, she yokes the bulls herself and does the whole day's work in his place. Her father refuses the result, because the bargain was the stranger's and not hers. The argument grows louder, and she is standing in the middle between 2 shouting men. She has to choose one of them, and she chooses, and the choice wakes her up. At first light, she takes the locked chest down and sets it on her knees. She opens it, and she looks at what is inside, and she touches nothing. She sits like that long enough for the light in the window to change color. Then she shuts the lid, puts the chest back, and covers her face with both hands. Her older sister comes in later that morning, and she has been crying as well. Her sons are with the Greeks, and if the Greeks die in that field, the boys go too. She asks for help without saying the stranger's name, because that is the decent way. She asks for her children, she cries, and she takes her sister's hands in hers. The younger woman hears her own answer come out fast and completely steady. She says she will do it. She says it is for the boys, and both women accept that. It is the first lie in this story, and it is the one she tells herself. Neither of them says aloud that a princess who does this is a traitor by evening. When the sister has gone, she takes out one small box and holds it to the window. Inside is a dark ointment pressed from a root that grew where a chained prisoner bled. It was cut at night with a bronze blade, and she did not look behind her once. That ointment makes a man's skin refuse fire for a single day and no longer. She sends word to arrange a meeting at the temple on the road outside the walls. She will bring the box, he will bring nothing, and they have never spoken. Above the palace the sky clears, and the goddesses on the mountain have what they wanted. They will not appear in her life again in any form that helps her. The temple of the crossroads goddess stands on the river road outside the city walls. It is a low building with a walled yard, an altar, and 2 black poplars at the gate. She comes out to it before the sun is up, in a wagon, with her women around her. She sends them away to the far side of the yard on an errand that takes time. Then she stands by the altar, with a small box in her hand, and waits. He comes up the road alone, with 2 of his men left behind at the turning. She has been looking at his face for 3 days inside her own head. In front of her, he is taller than that, and he is nervous, and he is real. Neither of them starts well, and for a moment they both look at the ground. She holds out the box before he can finish whatever he was going to say. She tells him to wash in the river at night and to burn an offering to her goddess alone. She tells him to rub the ointment into his skin and over his shield and his spear. For 1 day nothing made of fire will hold on him, and after that it will. She tells him about the men who will come up out of the ground with weapons drawn. Do not meet them, she says, and do not stand in front of them at all. Throw a stone into the middle of the crop and then step back and watch. She has just handed a stranger the keys to her father's country and her own life. He understands what it costs her, or he understands enough of it to speak. He says that if she comes back to Greece with him, she will be his wife. He says it there, in that yard, with his hand on the altar of her goddess. He says the whole country will honor her, and that nothing will part them but death. She looks at the altar, and then at him, and she believes every word of it. That is the promise. Hold this yard, this altar, and this sentence in your mind, because this is the object the story returns to. 9 years later, a man in another city will explain that it never really counted. Her women are coming back across the yard, and there is nothing more to say. She gets into the wagon, and the horses go, and she does not look back once. He walks down to the river, holding a box that weighs almost nothing at all. That night, the crew hears the whole plan, and nobody can decide how to feel about it. They came for a hide of gold, and they are being saved by a girl they have not met. At midnight, he goes down into the water, alone in the dark, and washes. He digs a pit on the bank, makes the offering as she told him, and does not look up. Something moves in the trees behind him, and the light on the water goes out. He walks back to the ship without turning his head, and nobody asks him anything. In the last hour before dawn, he opens the box and works the ointment into his skin. His hands go over the shield, the spear shaft, and the bronze rim, slowly and completely. Then he sits on a bench and holds his own spear out at arm's length. The wood bends and springs and will not break, and the strength in his arm is not his. The plain of the war god is flat, black soil, and it has not been plowed for years. The king arrives in a chariot with his household, and takes the highest ground. His younger daughter is with the women, and she is holding her sleeves in her fists. A plow lies in the middle of the field, iron, single piece, too heavy for 2 men. The bulls come up out of an underground stall, and the crowd on the slope goes back. They are bronze from hoof to shoulder, and they stand still while the air above them shakes. One of them lowers its head and breathes, and the grass in front of it goes black. He walks out onto the field, carrying the shield in front of him and nothing else. The first bull comes at a run and hits the shield and drives him back 3 paces. The fire washes over him and around him, and the crowd on the slope makes one sound. He holds. He forces the head down by the horn, drives the animal onto its knees, and holds it there. The second one comes in from the side and takes him in the ribs with its shoulder. He goes down on one knee, keeps the shield up, and gets his hand on the second horn. Then he brings both of them together and puts the yoke across their necks. On the slope, his crew is on its feet, and the city is silent. He plows the field from one end to the other with the goad in his hand. Steam comes off the wet earth, the furrows are straight, and the day is barely half gone. The king sends the seed down to the edge of the field in a bronze helmet. What is in the helmet looks like ivory, curved, small, and there are hundreds of them. He walks the furrows and drops them in behind him the way a farmer sows barley. The field starts to move. Points come up out of the black soil in rows, and then rims of shields, and then helmets. Men rise out of the ground fully armed, shaking the earth off their shoulders. In a few minutes, there is an army standing in a plowed field, looking for something to kill. He picks up a stone from the edge of the furrows, and it takes both of his arms. He throws it high into the middle of them, and then goes down flat behind his shield. The stone lands, and the men closest to it turn on each other immediately. The line breaks in the center, and the whole field goes into itself in one motion. The crowd on the slope watches an army destroy itself over nothing in the space of an hour. He comes in along the edges while it is still going and finishes what is left. When it is over, he is standing in a field of turned earth and armor, and he is not marked. On the high ground, the king turns his chariot around before the last of them is down. He does not come down to the field, he does not speak, and he does not pay. That night, he sits in his hall and works out how to burn a Greek ship at anchor. Somebody in the house hears the plan through a wall, and the message goes to her room. She has perhaps 4 hours, and she uses about 10 seconds of them to decide. She takes the boxes out of the chest and ties them into the fold of her dress. In the doorway, she stops and looks at the room she has slept in her whole life. She cuts off one lock of her hair and leaves it on the bed for her mother. Then she goes down through the house barefoot with her sandals in her hand. The doors of that palace open for her because she has never once been suspected. She runs the whole river road in the dark and arrives at the ship shaking. She tells them the fleece has to be taken tonight or there will be no morning. He takes her hand and swears the promise again, in front of his crew this time. The grove of the war god is black under the trees, and the guards are on the far side. There is a smell in it like cold metal, and no bird is making any sound. The oak stands in a clearing, and the hide on it is holding a light that has no source. Around the trunk, the coils lie in rings as thick as a man's body. The head comes up, and the sound it makes goes out over the whole river valley. Nurses in the city wake up and put their hands on their children without knowing why. She walks toward it. She goes in front of him, alone, with her voice low and level and never stopping. She calls the goddess of the crossroads by 3 names, and she does not blink. In one hand, she carries a fresh branch dipped in something dark from a small box. She sprinkles it, and the head sways lower, and the coils around the trunk begin to spread. The huge body settles into the roots the way water finds a level in a bowl. The eyes are still open, and they are not seeing anything, and the ridge of it stops moving. She holds her position with the branch out, and tells him to take it and be quick. He climbs the trunk, cuts the hide free, and it comes off heavier than it looks. Coming down, he holds it away from his body, and the light of it is on the leaves. Gold moves across her face and her hands, and she is standing over a sleeping monster. On the ship, the crew reaches out to touch it as it comes over the rail. The moorings are cut, not untied, and the oars go in before the sky changes color. She stands at the stern and watches the towers of her father's city come out of the dark. She is 19 or 20, she is a princess, and she has no country as of tonight. Every road behind her is closed, and there is only one man standing on this deck. Behind them, in the palace above the river, a bed with a lock of hair on it is found. The Colchian fleet goes out of the river the same day, and it goes out complete. 50 ships and more, packed with men, crewed by sailors who have used this sea for generations. The king stands on the bank and gives an order about his daughter that has no second half. At the head of the fleet is her brother, and his name is Absyrtus. He is a young man with his father's face, and he has never been beaten at anything. Ahead of him is one ship, overloaded in unknown water, running for a coast it cannot find. The Argo goes north and west along the shore, and then turns up a great river. What they do not know is that this river splits, and the other branch is faster. The Colchians take it, and they come out ahead of the Greeks and not behind them. When the Argo finally reaches open water, there are ships already waiting across the mouth. There is a group of islands there, low, grassy, with one small temple on the largest. The Greeks put in on one island, and the Colchians take the shore and the water between. Nobody attacks, because the local tribes on that coast are related to Colchis by marriage. One ship against a fleet on a hostile coast is not a battle, it is arithmetic. So the two sides send men across in a boat, and they talk for 2 days. The terms come back, and on paper, the terms are reasonable and almost generous. The fleece stays with the Greeks, because the tasks were set by the king and completed. The girl does not. She is to be handed to a third king on a nearby coast for judgment. If she left her father's house by force, she goes home to her father with an escort. That is the offer, and the captain of the Argo accepts it on the beach. He accepts it before he has said one word to her about any of it. She hears it from a crewman on the sand, and she comes to find him at once. She reminds him what she put in his hand at a temple gate in the dark. She reminds him whose army lay down in a plowed field so that he could stand up. She asks him what he thinks a court of foreign kings will decide about a runaway daughter. He tells her the agreement buys them time, and that time is what they have to buy. He tells her nothing has changed, and that he is thinking about the whole crew. It is a reasonable speech, delivered calmly, and it is the first of its kind. 9 years later, she will hear the same voice make the same kind of sense again. Something in her closes while he is still talking, and she stops arguing. Then she tells him what they are going to do instead, and she does not soften it. She is not a passenger in what follows, and the story does not pretend otherwise. Gifts go across the water to her brother that evening, and one of them is a robe. A message goes with them, and the message is written the way a frightened sister writes. She says she was taken out of the house against her will and kept on the ship. She says she wants to come home and that she cannot speak in front of the Greeks. She asks him to meet her alone, at night, in the temple on the small island. She says the fleece can come back too, and that he can carry both to their father. He is young, he loves his sister, and there is nothing in that message he doubts. Night on the island, and the temple is a small stone building with one door. He comes across in a boat with two men, and leaves them holding it at the water. He walks up alone, unarmed, because he is meeting his sister and not an enemy. He goes in through the door and starts talking to her about their father. There is a shadow behind the door that she knows about, and he does not. She turns her face away and puts the edge of her veil across her eyes. The lamp is still burning on the stone shelf where she set it down. Outside, two men wait by a boat and hear nothing at all from the building. When the door opens again, a torch is raised into the air above the roof. That is a signal, and it is answered from the dark water off the beach. The rest of what happens on that island happens on the beach and not in the temple. By first light, there is one boat pulled up on the sand with nobody in it. In the Colchian camp across the water, the fleet is a body with the head gone. The men who came for the sister were commanded by the sun, and the sun is not there. They know what waits in that hall for a fleet that comes back with empty hands. The Argo leaves the islands at dawn with a fair wind and a following sea. Behind them, the water is full of small boats moving slowly between the ships. Men in them are leaning over the sides and lifting something out of the water. One tradition says that is why the pursuit ended, and that the delay was the point. Another says the fleet simply broke apart the moment its leader failed to return. The Greek ship is already a shape on the horizon, and the sail is very white. She stands at the stern again, in the same place she stood leaving her father's city. 6 weeks ago she had a house, a temple, a mother, a father, and a brother. She has a ship, a hide of gold under a bench, and a man who explains things well. There is no version of the rest of her life that includes going home. That is what the love cost her, and the bill is not finished, and she is 20. The sea takes about a day to answer. The wind dies, then it turns, and the sail comes down, and the sky goes the color of iron. The ship is driven north for days into water where the crew recognizes nothing. Rain falls without stopping, and the men bail in shifts and stop speaking to each other. On the fourth night, at the prow, the beam of dark oak from Dodona speaks. The crew is awake, and every man on board hears it, and nobody moves afterward. It says that a god has been offended, and that the ship will not reach Greece. It says the offense was committed in a temple, and that a temple does not forget. It says there is one woman on the western sea who can wash this off them. Until she does it, the beam says, this ship goes nowhere that anyone wants. Nobody on deck looks at the two of them, and that is worse than looking. The island is small, green, and there is smoke coming from a house above the beach. Animals come down to meet the boat, and they are not any animals the crew knows. They have the wrong number of things, they move badly, and their eyes are not right. The woman who lives there is at the tide line already, waiting for them to land. She is a daughter of the sun, and her name is Circe, and she is the king's own sister. She takes them up to her house, and she does not ask a single question first. The right comes first, and the questions come after, and that is the rule in her house. She does the work at the hearth, with water, with a young animal, and with fire. She holds their hands over the flame, she speaks, and the smoke goes up and out. Then she sits down and looks at the young woman properly for the first time. She sees the light in her eyes, which is the light in her own, and she goes still. They are the same blood, son on one side, and she knows exactly whose child this is. The young woman answers her in the language of Colchis so the Greeks cannot follow. She tells the truth, most of it, and she leaves out the door and the veil. Her aunt understands the shape of what is missing, because she has heard confessions before. When it is finished, she stands up and tells them the rite is complete and binding. Then she tells them to leave her island before evening and not to come back. She will not have them at her table, and she says so with the food in the room. She does not curse the girl, and she does not help her, and she does not touch her. At the door she says one thing, quietly, about a house that is now closed to her. They go down to the beach and put out, and the animals on the sand watch them go. Ahead of the ship there is a long sea, a wedding on an island, and a home coast. On that coast, an old man is still sitting in a chair that belongs to somebody else. The judgment on the western island comes first, and it takes one night to settle. The king there rules that a daughter still unmarried goes back to her father's house. A married woman belongs to her husband, and no court touches her after that. The queen of that island hears the ruling before the Greeks do, and she sends word down. That night, in a cave above the shore, the crew builds a bed out of cut branches. They spread the golden fleece over it, because it is the only thing on the ship worth spreading. Girls of the island stand at the mouth of the cave with flowers and sing until morning. It is a wedding held in a hurry to beat a legal deadline by a few hours. She is married in a cave on an island whose name she learned 2 days earlier. In the morning, the Colchian ships turn away because there is nothing left to claim. The rest of the voyage home is long, and it is not the subject of this story. They come around into home water in the spring with the hull soft and the crew thin. The ship comes in past the headland, and the town comes down to the water to look. Nobody on that beach expected this crew to come back, and the king expected it least. A hide of gold is carried up the street, through a crowd that opens in front of it. It is set down in the hall of the palace in front of the man in the chair. The captain says the thing he has waited 5 years to say, in public, out loud. The task is done, he says, and the terms were yours, and the chair is mine. Peleus looks at the fleece, and then at the crowd in his own doorway, and he stalls. He says the matter needs a day, and then he says it needs a festival. He is old now, his hands shake, and he has spent years watching the road. He is not going to hand over a kingdom because of a promise made at an altar. He does not refuse in words, he refuses by simply never getting to the sentence. Days pass, then a market week, and the hall is always busy with something else. The young man from the mountain has no army, no faction, and no allies in this city. There is a further account, and it is very hard on Pelias. One tradition says that while the ship was gone, he finished what he had started. It says the old father in the house by the harbor did not live to see the return. In that account, there is a grave to visit, and there is nothing to negotiate about. The version told by Ovid gives the father back instead, and it changes everything after it. In that telling, the son asks his wife to take years off his father and give them to him. She refuses the trade and says she will do the work without taking his years at all. She goes out for 9 nights, alone, and comes back with a wagon full of cut plants. In the yard, she builds 2 altars, one to her goddess and one to the goddess of youth. The old man is brought out and laid down, and he is thin and gray and barely present. What is done at that hearth is done in the dark, and the household is sent away. In the morning, an old man walks out of the house, and he is not old. His hair is dark, his back is straight, and he asks for food like a working man. People in that street stand in their doorways and put their hands over their mouths. The whole city sees it within a day, and after that, everyone in Iolcus believes her. That is the fact that matters, whichever account is true, and the rest follows from it. There are 4 women in the palace who watch this happen and cannot stop thinking about it. They are the daughters of Pelias, and they are grown, and they love their father. He is failing in front of them the way old men fail, slowly and in small humiliations. He forgets names, he sleeps in the afternoon, and he needs a hand on the stairs. A foreign woman living down the street can apparently reverse that in one night. They come to her, and they come on their own, and she does not have to send for them. She receives them well, and she is warm, and she takes her time about everything. She tells them the work is real, but that it cannot be done by a stranger's hands. It has to be done by people who love the man, because love is part of the method. Then she offers to show them, so that they can judge the thing for themselves. In the courtyard, they set a bronze cauldron on a fire and fill it with water. She throws in cut plants from a basket, and the water goes clear and then very still. A ram is brought out, the oldest in the household, with worn teeth and a dull coat. It can barely stand, and one of the women has known this animal since she was a girl. It goes into the cauldron, and the lid goes on, and she stands with her hands on the rim. She speaks over it, without hurrying, and the steam comes up around her face. Then the lid comes off, and something small moves inside and puts its front feet on the edge. A lamb climbs out of the pot and stands in the courtyard shaking water off its back. It goes straight to the wall and starts pulling at the grass growing out of the stones. 4 women look at a lamb, and then at each other, and nobody says anything sensible. That night in the palace, a lamp burns in a room, and the old king is asleep in it. His daughters stand in the doorway, and they have been told exactly what to do first. They are frightened, and they are certain, and they are doing this because they love him. The oldest of them goes in ahead of the others, and the door closes behind them all. In the courtyard, a cauldron is already on the fire with water in it and nothing else. No plants have been put into that water, and the basket beside it is empty. The woman who lit that fire is not in the palace, and she has not been there all evening. What happens in that room is not shown here, and it does not need to be. The house is quiet by the middle of the night, and it stays quiet until dawn. In the morning, the doors of the hall stand open, and there is nobody in the chair. The 4 women are sitting in the courtyard in their night clothes, looking at their hands. One of them keeps turning hers over and putting them down and turning them over again. The son of Peleus comes into that courtyard, and he understands the whole thing in about a minute. His name is Acastus. He sailed on the Argo, and he rode beside the man he now exiles. By evening, the city has decided, and the decision does not require a trial. The gates are shut, the crowd on the street is not curious, and the guards do not answer questions. 2 people walk out of Iolcus with what they can carry, and the ship stays where it is. Consider what has actually happened here, because the whole voyage turns on this one point. A boy was sent to the end of the world to get a throne back from his uncle. The throne is now empty, the uncle is gone, and the family claim is stronger than ever. And it is unreachable forever, precisely because of the way it was cleared. The city will accept many things, but it will not accept what it saw in that courtyard. He got everything he asked for, and he got it in a form that could not be used. There is one more thing here that will matter enormously in about 10 years. She did this one alone. Her husband was not in the room, he was not at the cauldron, and he asked for none of it. She did it because a kingdom for him was the only currency she had left to pay in. The city that watched a lamb climb out of a pot did not blame him for any of it. It blamed the foreign woman with the strange accent, and he led it, and they left together. The road out goes south, along the coast, toward a rich city on a narrow neck of land. Corinth has money, ships, a good port, and a king with a daughter of marriageable age. The road into Corinth climbs a ridge, and the city sits under a rock with a fort on top. 2 harbors, one on each sea, and everything crossing between them pays a fee at the gate. Nobody here cares who ruled in Iolcus, and nobody here is going to check anyone's story. They are taken in as exiles, given a house, and told where foreigners may not go. The house is on a slope above the port, with a courtyard and a wall and 1 gate. For a while, a famous ship is the only thing they own that anyone wants to see. The Argo is dragged up onto the sand below the town and propped on timbers. 9 years pass in that house, and this is the only quiet part of the whole story. A son is born, and then another one, and the older one grows up on that slope. He is about 10 now, dark-haired, and he runs errands down to the harbor gate. The younger one follows him everywhere, and copies whatever he does with his hands. In the courtyard, there is a loom, a bench, a fig tree, and a woman who does not go out much. Corinth is polite to her, and Corinth never once forgets where her accent came from. She is the woman from the Far East who can do things, and mothers watch their children near her. The husband is different, because a man with a story is welcome anywhere in Greece. Down on the sand, the ship is drying out, and the grass is starting to come up around the keel. The king of this city is called Creon, and he has 1 daughter and no living sons. That is not a family situation. It is a political problem with a fixed set of solutions. The daughter is about 16, and she has been the answer to it since she was born. Whoever marries her gets Corinth, and Creon has been choosing carefully for years. He looks at the famous exile who sits at his table and has no city of his own. A man with a name and no army is the safest son a king can possibly acquire. The offer is made, and it is made in a room with nobody else in it. It is accepted, not after a struggle, and not with any evidence that a struggle took place. The wedding is announced in the city, and the announcement reaches the house on the slope. She hears it from a servant, in her own courtyard, in the middle of an ordinary morning. He comes up to the house afterward to explain, and he is not ashamed, and that is the point. He has an argument prepared, and it is a good argument, and he believes every part of it. He starts with the debt, and he pays it in a way that costs him nothing. He says she was living among barbarians, and that he brought her into Greece and its law. He says she is famous now, and that she would be nobody in her father's country. He says the help she gave him came from a goddess and not from her own decision. Then he moves on to the practical part, which is the part that actually matters to him. 2 exiled boys have nothing, he says, and he is trying to fix that permanently. Royal brothers, he says, half-brothers, but born inside the walls of a palace. He says the marriage is not about the girl at all, and he says it with a straight face. He says he would have taken care of it quietly if she were capable of being reasonable. Then he offers her money for the road and letters to friends of his abroad. She listens to all of it, standing, without sitting down once during the whole speech. Then she asks him one question, and it is the only question in this scene that lands. She asks him what he swore, and where he swore it, and whose altar his hand was on. There was a yard outside a foreign city, and 2 black poplars and a stone altar. He put his hand on it and said that nothing would part them except death. She reminds him that a plowed field full of armed men lay down because of her. She reminds him that a serpent that had never slept in its life went down at her voice. She reminds him that she has no father, no country, and no brother, and why that is. She does not raise her voice while she does it, and that is the frightening part. He tells her that the oath was made under compulsion by a goddess and does not bind him. That is his answer to the altar, and it is the answer of a man who has thought about it. And he is not lying about the arrow, which is the strange, cold joke inside this story. The gods really did aim at her, and he is really using that as legal grounds. It served him for 9 years while it was useful, and it becomes her defect the moment it is not. He leaves the house believing he has behaved well, and he goes on believing that. Later that day, the king comes to her gate himself, with an armed escort behind him. He does not come inside, and he does not sit, and he says his business in the doorway. She and her children are banished from Corinth and the whole territory, effective now. He is honest with her about the reason, which is the only decent thing anyone does here. He says he is afraid of her, and that he is not ashamed of being afraid of her. He says she is clever, she has been injured, and she knows things that other women do not. He would rather be hated today than be sorry later, and he tells her so plainly. She does not fight it, and that should have warned him, and it does not. She kneels in her own doorway and asks him for 1 day to arrange the children, 1 day to find somewhere for 2 boys to go, and 1 day to pack a house. He knows better, he says so out loud, and he says he has always been too soft. Then, he gives her the day. He turns his escort around and walks back down to the town to prepare a wedding. She stands in the doorway and watches the last of the spears go around the corner. In 1 day, she has to solve a problem that has no solution available to her. She cannot go east because there is a fleet on that coast that remembers a temple. She cannot go north because Iolcus shut its gates on her 9 years ago. She cannot stay because the king who fears her has just written the order himself. She has 2 children, no city, no family, no protection anywhere. A woman alone in Greece is not a citizen, and she is not a widow, and she is not safe. Everything she has done since a temple gate in Colchis was spent on one man's future. He is going to be the father of the king of Corinth by the end of the week. She goes back into the house and closes the door, and sits down in the courtyard. She sits through the afternoon without moving, while the light goes across the wall. In the evening, a traveler comes up the road, looking for the famous house on the slope. He is a king from Athens, older, tired, on his way home from an oracle he did not understand. He has no children, and he wants some, and he has been to ask a god about it. He is an old friend of this house, and he stops out of courtesy and finds her sitting in the dark. He asks her what has happened, and she tells him, and he is genuinely appalled. She asks him for one thing only, and she asks for it in the careful language of a guest. If she ever comes to Athens on her own feet, will his city receive her? He says yes, and he swears it, because that is what a decent man does. He will not carry her out of Corinth, because that would put him at war with Creon. But if she arrives at his gate by herself, the gate opens, and that is a promise. He goes on his way in the morning, without ever knowing what he just made possible. Until that evening, she had nowhere on earth to go after tomorrow. Now she has one door standing open at the far end of the road. And a person with somewhere to run afterward can consider doing things she could not consider before. In the courtyard, the loom stands still, and the fig tree is losing its leaves. Down at the palace, they are stringing pine garlands across the stone of the great court. In a room in that palace, a girl of about 16 is having her hair pinned up for a fitting. And in a house on the slope, a woman opens a chest that has not been opened in 9 years. The chest is old, and it came out of a palace on a river at the far end of the sea. It has small drawers, and each drawer has been shut for 9 years. She opens them one at a time in the light of the courtyard and takes stock. What she is looking at was made for another life, in another country, by a girl. She sends a servant down the hill with a message for the man about to be married. When he comes up, she is already at the gate, and her face has changed completely. She tells him he was right, and that she was angry, and that anger is a woman's fault. She says the marriage is sensible, and that she should have seen it as he did. She asks him to forgive a foreigner who does not understand how Greek families work. She calls the boys out into the courtyard and tells them to take his hand. He takes it, and he is relieved, and he starts explaining his plan for their future. She turns her face away, and he thinks she is crying about the exile, and she is not. Then she asks him for one small thing, and she asks it in front of the children. Let the boys stay in Corinth, she says, and let the new wife ask her father for it. Let them carry a gift to the bride themselves, from their mother, as a request. She has a dress of fine cloth and a crown of worked gold that came from the sun. These things belong to her grandfather, she says, and they are the last things she owns. He hesitates, because he does not want to spend his new wife's goodwill on this. Then he agrees, because it costs him nothing, and because it makes the mourning easier. She kneels down in front of them and straightens the older one's clothes with both hands. She holds his face for slightly too long, and the servants in the yard look away. Then she stands up and tells them to go, and the gate closes behind them. She stays exactly where she is in the yard, and she does not go inside. Some of what happens now was decided in a courtyard 9 years ago in Iolcus, and some of it was decided on a mountain by 2 goddesses who never came back. The palace at midday is loud, and the boys are taken up through the great court. The bride is in her rooms, and she has been told there is a gift from the exiles. She is 16, and she is already tired of hearing that woman's name in this house. When the chest is opened in front of her, she stops caring who sent it. This is where the story returns to the room from the very beginning of this video. The pale dress, the crown of thin gold, the lamplight moving on the painted wall. The 2 boys already at the door, and nobody in the room asking whose sons they are. She lifts the crown with both hands, turns toward the polished bronze, and puts it on. She puts on the dress as well, and she walks the length of the room to see it move. She looks over her shoulder at the way it falls, and she is delighted with all of it. The boys are sent home with a kind word and a promise about their mother. What happens after that is described in Euripides by a man who ran out of that house. He does not describe it as a spectacle, and he never once uses the word beautiful. A servant sees the girl's color change while she is still walking and calls out to her. The girl does not answer, and then she sits down suddenly on a chair by the wall. The whole household is in the corridor within a minute, and none of them can help. Somebody runs for her father, and somebody else runs for water, and neither is any use. The messenger who tells this story leaves the building at that point and does not look back. From the courtyard, the women outside hear the sound coming from the upper rooms. Smoke comes out of the window of the bride's room and goes up over the roof. The old king arrives at a run, with his cloak in his hand and his guards behind him. He goes into the room where his daughter is, and he is the only one who goes in. The doors of that wing stand open for a long time, and nothing comes out of them. Creon does not come out either, and the wedding guests are still down in the great court. The garlands are still up on the walls, the wine jars are still sealed in their rows. Somebody finally goes down and tells the musicians in the court to stop playing. That is how a royal house in Greece ends in a single afternoon. A father who was afraid of the wrong thing, and a daughter who tried on a gift. The messenger comes up the hill to the house on the slope and tells her to run. He says the whole city will be at her gate as soon as it understands what happened. She listens to the entire account without interrupting him even once. Then she thanks him, and she pays him, and she sends him away from her door. She stands in the courtyard afterward, and she has about an hour and no choices left. 2 boys are inside that house, and they have just carried a gift to a king's daughter. There is no city on this coast that will take them in after this afternoon. Corinth is coming up the hill, and Corinth does not have a court for children of foreigners. She has an open gate in Athens for one person on foot, and for nobody else. In Euripides, she stands in front of the door and argues with herself for a long time. She changes her mind 3 times, and twice she says she cannot do it. She looks at their faces, and at their hands, and at the way the younger one stands. She sends them inside, and she calls them back out, and she holds them again. What is coming, she says, is not what any mother plans for her children. She says the words that a woman says when she is looking at her own life. Then she says that her anger is stronger than her thinking, and she goes in after them. The door of the house closes from the inside. The street outside stays exactly as it was, and the fig tree does not move. This is the part of the story that Greek writers refuse to put on a stage. Euripides keeps it behind that door and gives the audience only the sound of it. We are going to do the same thing, and we are going to stay in the street. There is nothing to see here, and there never was anything to see here. The women who came up the hill are standing outside the wall, and they do not go in. He comes up the hill with armed men behind him, and his mind is on his sons. He has just come from a palace that has no king in it and no bride. He is thinking about the children, because the city is going to want somebody to punish. He reaches the gate of his own house, and the door in front of him is barred. He calls out, he puts his shoulder to the wood, and he tells the men to break it in. Then a shadow goes across the courtyard, and every man in it looks up. Above the roof of the house there is a chariot in the air, and it is not standing still. It is drawn by 2 serpents, with their coils held out flat behind them. The woman in it is standing upright, with one hand on the rail and no expression at all. This is the vehicle of the sun, sent by her grandfather, and it is not a symbol. It is a door out of Corinth for exactly 1 passenger, and it has arrived on time. What she carries with her in that chariot is not described here, and it is not shown. He stands in the yard below with his hands empty, and he starts asking questions. He asks her how she can be looking at the sun and looking at him at the same time. She tells him he is only speaking now because there is nothing left to lose by it. He says he wants to bury them, and to put his hands on them, and to say goodbye. She refuses him that, and it is the last thing she ever refuses him. She tells him the debt was his, and that he will live a long time paying it. He calls on the gods, and he calls on them by name, and he calls very loudly. Nothing in the sky above that courtyard answers him in any way at all. The 2 who fired the arrow into a girl in Colchis are not present and are not listening. The chariot turns over the roof and goes east and up until the light takes it. Down in the courtyard, a man is still standing with his face turned toward the sky. The wedding garlands in the great court are taken down by servants that same evening. And on the beach below the town, the old ship lies on its timbers with the tide coming in. The chariot comes down inside the walls of Athens, and the city does not know what to do. The king who made a promise on a road in Corinth keeps it the same week. He is not a fool, and he understands exactly what has arrived at his gate. He also swore an oath in front of a woman who has now been failed by 2 men. Athens takes her in, and she is given a house, and after a while she is given a marriage. She bears the old king a son, and the boy is called Medea, and he is healthy. For several years she lives in the best city in Greece as the wife of its king. She has a household, a name, a place at the table, and a child who is safe. It does not hold, because a grown son of the king arrives from the coast one day. He comes in with a sword he took out from under a rock, and a claim to the house. She sees the danger to her own boy before anyone else in the palace does. She acts first, she is caught at it, and the old king chooses the older son. She is put out of Athens with a child on her hip, and 1 day of warning. And here is the thing about her that the story never quite says out loud. She goes east, and she is received, and her son grows up and inherits a country. One tradition says the land took its name from the boy and kept it for centuries. She loses 4 cities in her life, and she is never once left standing in a road. Her father's house closed, her husband's house closed, and the son kept sending transport. The family that never lifted a hand to help her also never let her fall. That is what it means to be the granddaughter of a god in a story like this one. Now look at the man on the other side of the accounting. He is about 40 years old, and he has been famous since he was 20. He has no throne in Iolcus, because a city shut its gates on him 9 years ago. He has no house in Corinth, because the king who gave it to him is dead. He has no wife, because there is no altar in Greece that will marry him now. He has no sons, and there is no grave in that city with his family name on it. What he has is a story, and for a few years, the story is still worth something. He goes to the festivals, and he sits at the good tables, and he tells it well. He talks about the bulls with the bronze feet, and the field, and the stone he threw. He does not talk about the temple on the island, or about the cauldron in the yard. And the story keeps changing under him while he is still telling it. Somewhere in those years, he stops being the man who took the fleece off the tree. He becomes the man who was married to her, and then he becomes a warning. Fathers in that part of Greece start using his name to explain something to their sons. The Greeks were not sentimental about oaths, and they did not treat them as poetry. A man who swore at an altar and then argued his way out of it was a specific kind of man. Zeus was believed to watch those promises personally and to be slow and to be certain. Nobody put a curse on him at any point in this story, and nobody needed to. He simply stopped being lucky in a world that had carried him for 20 years. The invitations thin out, and then they stop, and the tables have other guests. He moves along the coast the way men do when there is nowhere they are expected. He comes back to the bay below Corinth because there is one thing there that is his. The Argo has been on the sand for a long time now, and nobody maintains her. The timbers have gone gray, and the seams have opened, and grass grows out of the deck. He sits down beside it, and after a while he starts sleeping in the shade under the bow. A man with gray hair, no cloak, no guard, and no name that anyone here still uses. This is the shape at the beginning of this video, and now you know how it got there. Above him is the beam of dark oak that was cut in the grove at Dodona. It was set into the prow by a goddess before the ship ever touched water. It spoke twice, and both times it told the crew something true that they did not want. It has been holding the weight of a rotting hull for a long time in salt air. One tradition says it came down on him while he was asleep underneath it. That is how the greatest captain in Greece is said to have died, alone, on a beach. The last thing he built killed him, and it took its time about it, and it was quiet. Now go back to the beginning of all of it, because that is where the account is settled. A girl in a palace at the eastern end of the sea was standing in a doorway. She had helped nobody, harmed nobody, and asked for nothing from anyone in Greece. Two goddesses needed a king to fall and a ship to come home with a hide of gold. They sent a child with a bow, and he put an arrow into her and went home to play. Everything after that is the arrow traveling, and it does not stop at her. It goes through a young man in a temple on a small island in the west. It goes through an old king in a courtyard with a cauldron that had no herbs in it. It goes into 4 women who did something loving and woke up holding their hands. It reaches a girl of 16 who did nothing at all except open a gift. It reaches her father, who ran into a room because he was her father. It goes through a door in a house on a slope above the harbor of Corinth. And it comes to rest under a beam of oak on a beach about 20 years later. Count the people in that list, and then count the gods who paid anything for it. The 2 on the mountain got their war, their fallen king and their fleece delivered. Neither of them appears again in this story after the ship reaches the eastern shore. There is no scene anywhere in the sources where either of them is asked a question. That is the reason the Greeks told this to their children instead of singing it to them. Not because a foreign woman was dangerous, whatever later writers wanted the story to mean. Because a promise made at an altar is the only thing standing between a person and this. He broke one, and he had an excellent argument, and the argument was even partly true. And a woman with nothing left standing behind her is not a monster in this story. She is what a person becomes when every door is closed by somebody else. The beach below Corinth is empty now, and the tide comes in over the timbers. The ribs of the ship stand up out of the sand where the hull has gone. Grass has taken the deck, and the sea has taken most of the keel already. Somewhere under that sand there is a beam that was cut from a talking oak, and the sea in front of it still knows the whole road east to Colchis.